Gentle breezes swept through the town of Maplewood, carrying the delicate fragrance of the early morning. Under the golden hue of dawn, a man stood silently on a hill where echoes of old memories still lingered. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, as if trying to hold on to every bit of air from this place, the place that once marked the beginning of a forgotten dream. Ethan Blake, once hailed by the world as a business genius, no longer wore expensive suits or strode confidently through towering skyscrapers. Instead, he was a man searching for himself, lost in layers of memories and a late attempt at redemption. But can a person truly change? Can past mistakes ever be undone? And will the things he is doing now bring him the meaning he has always longed for? Follow this inspiring story, and don't forget to like and subscribe to help spread this motivation to even more people. In a towering skyscraper at the heart of New York City, Ethan Blake, a powerful and wealthy CEO, sat in his vast office. Beyond the glass windows, the city buzzed with millions of dazzling lights, but within him lay an invisible emptiness. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he had truly felt happy. He had everything: fame, fortune, power, but in the end, they were nothing more than meaningless numbers on paper. His days were consumed by intense meetings, billion-dollar investment deals, and extravagant parties that he no longer had the heart to enjoy. That evening, as he returned to his luxurious penthouse, Ethan sat alone with a glass of wine in hand. A heavy rainstorm poured over the city, each raindrop tapping against the window like echoes from the past. He didn't know why, but a strange sorrow crept into his heart. Since becoming a billionaire, he had never felt so empty. He looked around the room, filled with the expensive things he had once dreamed of: rare art pieces, an exquisite collection of fine wines, and custom-designed furniture. Yet, none of them could warm his heart. Suddenly, memories of the past surfaced, of his younger, more passionate self, and of someone he had tried to forget for over a decade. More than 10 years ago, Ethan had been just a young man living in the small town of Maplewood. Back then, he wasn't a successful businessman but an ordinary guy with big dreams. And in that life, the most important person to him was Clara. Clara was the girl whose smile shone like the morning sun. She wasn't just Ethan's love, she was the one who understood him better than anyone else. They grew up together, sharing dreams and aspirations. As children, they would climb the hill behind town, sit beneath the old oak tree, and paint pictures of their future. Clara always believed that the world still held so much goodness. She had no desire for fame or wealth. Her dream was simple: to open a center for orphans, giving them a true home where they wouldn't have to worry about food or shelter. Ethan, back then, had believed in that dream too. He had once promised to help her make it a reality. Those days were like a beautiful dream. They spent time together, reading books, exploring endless green fields, and lying under the starry sky on Clara's rooftop. She had taught Ethan that happiness wasn't found in money, but in simple, meaningful moments. But Ethan was also an ambitious young man. He didn't want to be confined to a small town. He wanted to be rich, to prove that he could achieve something greater. And so, he left, chasing his ambitions, but leaving behind a broken heart. Ethan had promised to return once he succeeded. But the busy days in New York swept him away. Meetings, massive projects, and growing ambitions gradually made him forget the promise he once made. Clara remained in town, waiting, hoping, and then slowly losing faith. She never blamed him, but she knew he had changed. He was no longer the young man who once dreamed of creating a better world. Time passed, and Clara moved on with her life, but a small corner of her heart always belonged to Ethan. Then one day, Clara fell ill. The cruel disease stole her smile and also took away their chance to reunite. Before she left this world, she wrote a letter, the final letter, to the one she had once loved more than herself. The next day, Ethan received an old envelope among the stack of documents his assistant had brought in. Strangely, there was no sender address, only a single line of elegant handwriting, to Ethan Blake. Curious, he opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, yellowed with time, filled with words he never thought he would see again. Dear Ethan, if you are reading this, then perhaps we no longer have the chance to meet again. Do you still remember our dream? Back then, we once dreamed of building a place for less fortunate children, a place where they could be loved and educated without worrying about the future. But then, you left, to chase something greater. I never blamed you because I knew you always longed for success. But Ethan, does success truly make you happy? If one day you feel lost, return to the place where we once made our promise. There, you will find the answer you've been searching for. Forever, Clara. The name, Clara, felt like a dagger piercing Ethan's heart. It had been more than 10 years since he last saw her. Back then, he had left everything behind, left the woman he loved, to chase his dream of wealth. He had once thought he would return when he succeeded, but the relentless tide of life had carried him too far away. Now, Clara was no longer in this world, and Ethan realized that he had lost the most precious thing in his life. Ethan couldn't sit still. He had to find out what had happened to Clara and why this letter had reached him after all these years. He booked a flight that very night. For the first time in years, he didn't care about work, numbers, or who he was in the business world. The only thing he knew was that he had to go. On the flight to Maplewood, Ethan stared out the window, his mind flooded with conflicting thoughts. He wondered if the past would give him a chance to make amends. The rain continued to fall outside, but within Ethan, a small flame had been ignited. A flame of regret, but also of hope. The night flight carried Ethan back to Maplewood after more than a decade away. As the plane touched down at the small airport near the town, a strange yet familiar feeling washed over him. Once, he had thought he would never return to this place, but now, every road and every tree brought back memories he had tried to bury. He rented a car and drove toward the town. The familiar roads unfolded before him, lined with endless fields and small, cozy houses. Maplewood hadn't changed much, except for one undeniable truth: Clara was no longer here. Ethan stopped in front of a small cafe in the heart of town. It was the place where he and Clara had often spent time together, where they had shared their first dates. As he stepped inside, he felt the curious gazes of a few locals. Some of them recognized him, but no one spoke a word. Maplewood was a small town, and surely, the story of his departure, and what had happened to Clara, was still being told. He ordered a cup of black coffee and sat in the familiar corner where he and Clara used to sit. A middle-aged woman approached. It was Mrs. Margaret, the cafe owner, Ethan Blake. "I never thought I'd see you here again." Her voice carried a mix of surprise and subtle reproach. Ethan forced a faint smile. "Hello, Mrs. Margaret. It's been a long time, hasn't it?" Mrs. Margaret placed the cup of coffee on the table, studied him for a moment, then let out a quiet sigh. "Clara waited for you for a long time, Ethan. But in the end, she learned how to live without you." A sharp pain twisted in Ethan's chest. He knew he deserved the reproach, but now, all he wanted was to learn about Clara's final years. "Can you tell me about Clara? How did she live after I left?" Mrs. Margaret remained silent for a moment before looking directly into his eyes. Are you sure you want to know everything, Ethan? Because some truths might change you forever. Ethan froze. Her words unsettled him. What was it that he didn't know? Mrs. Margaret studied Ethan for a while, then sat down across from him, her voice heavy with reflection. Clara never blamed you, Ethan. She understood why you left. But that didn't mean it didn't break her heart. Ethan clenched his fists, feeling the weight of guilt consuming him. After you left, Clara poured her heart into building a small school for orphan children. That was her dream, and even without you, she was determined to make it a reality. The beginning was tough, but she never gave up. She did everything she could to give those children a real home. Ethan lowered his head. He remembered their youthful days, when they had dreamed of that very school together. But he had left her to fulfill it alone. Was she happy? He asked, his voice hoarse. Mrs. Margaret nodded. Yes, she was. But there were sorrows she never spoke of. Especially when illness struck. Ethan clenched his fists. I wasn't there when she needed me most. That's right, you weren't, Mrs. Margaret replied, but her voice no longer carried blame. But now, you've come back. Maybe it's not too late to do something. Ethan was about to ask more when Mrs. Margaret suddenly glanced toward the window, where an old man stood outside, watching him. There was something in his eyes, something Ethan couldn't quite understand. Who is he? Ethan asked. Mrs. Margaret shook her head. Someone who knows more than you think. If you want to learn the truth about Clara, find him. But be prepared. The next day, Ethan drove to the school Clara had built. It was a small but cozy building on the edge of town. A simple sign above the gate read, "The House of Dreams." As he stepped inside, he saw children playing in the yard. A young woman, who seemed to be a teacher, approached him. And you are? I'm Ethan Blake. I want to learn about Clara and this school. The woman smiled. I'm Emily, a teacher here. Come in, I'll tell you about everything Clara did. Inside a small room filled with children's hand-drawn pictures, Ethan listened as Emily recounted Clara's dedication to the school. She had single-handedly raised funds, rallied support from the community, and poured all her love into these children. Ethan looked around. On the wall were photographs of Clara with the children, and in one of them, she was beaming as she embraced a small child. He stepped closer, reaching out to touch the photo. A single tear silently rolled down his cheek. Ethan spent the entire day at the school, talking with the children and listening to their stories. They spoke of Clara with sparkling eyes, as if she were still there. As the sun set, Ethan stepped outside and looked up at the sky, painted in hues of fiery orange. He felt something shifting inside him. Perhaps, this was where he truly belonged. Perhaps, it was time to fulfill the promise he had once forgotten. Looking up at the sky, Ethan whispered softly, Clara, I've come back. And this time, I won't leave again. Ethan stayed in the town for several more days, listening to stories about Clara. But he couldn't shake the memory of the old man's gaze from before. Finally, he decided to find him. The man's name was Henry, a carpenter who had helped Clara build the school. When Ethan met him, Henry simply observed him for a moment before saying, You missed a lot, but there's still a chance to make things right. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Henry sighed and handed him an old notebook. Clara wrote her thoughts in here. She never stopped believing in you, even when illness consumed her. But more importantly, she didn't wait for you to change the world. She did it herself. Ethan opened the notebook, reading Clara's delicate handwriting. Each page was filled with plans, dreams, and painful confessions about how much she had missed him. His heart tightened. The last few pages contained her final message, written when she knew she didn't have much time left. Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. But I believe you still have time to find yourself again. Remember, happiness doesn't come from what we achieve, but from what we give. Ethan drove to the hill behind the town, the place where he and Clara had once sat under the stars. He lay down on the grass, gazing at the vast, shimmering sky. For the first time in years, he felt truly small. Memories of Clara filled his mind, her laughter echoing in his heart. A gentle breeze swept by, carrying the scent of wildflowers. He closed his eyes. Clara, I'm sorry. I was wrong. In the stillness of the night, Ethan realized that wealth and fame had never been what he truly needed. Happiness wasn't found in the numbers in his bank account, but in the simplest things, the things Clara had understood long ago. Ethan returned to the school. He watched the children playing, their innocent laughter warming his heart. Emily, the school's teacher, approached him. Will you be leaving soon? Ethan shook his head. No. I'm staying. And I want to help. He started with small tasks, fixing parts of the school, helping the children with their studies, talking with the townspeople. Gradually, he was no longer a stranger. He felt like he was rediscovering himself, not as Ethan Blake, the cold billionaire, but as the Ethan he once was, the man who had once dreamed of doing something meaningful. He spent time reading through Clara's journal again, trying to understand more about what she had done and the sacrifices she had made. Each page was a reminder that happiness wasn't about possessions but about giving. One evening, as Ethan was helping to repair the school's small library, his phone rang. It was his assistant from New York. Mr. Blake, we have an important deal about to close. You need to return immediately. Ethan looked around, the old bookshelves, the children reading under the warm glow of the lights. A decision was forming in his mind. He took a deep breath and replied. I'm sorry. I have a different life to build here, and for the first time in his life, Ethan felt completely free. Ethan knew this wasn't just a temporary change. He began thinking about how he could help the school grow. He reached out to his old business partners, not to invest in profitable ventures, but to seek support for underprivileged children. Each passing day, Ethan realized that he no longer thought about lavish parties, enormous figures, or billion-dollar deals. Instead, he found joy in the little things, the radiant eyes of the children when they received new books, the smiles of the townspeople as they saw the school improving. Ethan stood on the high hill where he and Clara once dreamed of their future. The wind blew through his hair, carrying the memories of a time long gone. But this time, he felt no regret. He smiled, knowing he had finally found the right path. Ethan Blake sat in the small room of the school, his eyes following the children playing outside. Many days had passed since he decided to stay in Maplewood. And within him, a battle was still raging. A part of him wanted to let go of everything and return to New York, to continue the life he had built for so many years. But another part, the one that had awakened after days surrounded by love and simplicity, did not want to leave. He had never imagined that he would feel such peace. No tense meetings, no overwhelming numbers weighing on his shoulders. Instead, he spent his time teaching the children to read, repairing old classrooms, and talking with the townspeople. With each passing day, he discovered something he had never paid attention to before, the deep contentment that came from helping others. One afternoon, as he was teaching a group of children to paint, a little girl ran up to him, holding out a colorful drawing. "Teacher Ethan, this is my picture." He smiled, taking the drawing, and was surprised to see an image of a man standing between two roads. On one side were towering skyscrapers, and on the other, a small school nestled in a field of green. He looked at the little girl, his heart tightening slightly. "What do you think I should choose?" The little girl tilted her head, thinking for a moment, then smiled. "I think you will stay with us." Ethan didn't say anything, but deep inside, a decision was beginning to take shape. That evening, as he was organizing the school's small library, his phone rang. On the other end was his assistant from New York. "Mr. Blake, there's an important deal about to be finalized. We need you back immediately." Ethan remained silent for a few seconds, looking out the window. Outside, the small town lay peacefully under the soft glow of the moonlight. He took a deep breath and then slowly said, "I'm sorry. I have a different life to build here." His assistant was stunned. "What are you saying? This is the biggest opportunity of the year." "The biggest opportunity of the year. But not the biggest opportunity of my life." Ethan smiled, feeling lighter than ever before. "I'm not that person anymore. Take over the company for me." He hung up, feeling as if he had just shed an enormous burden. In that moment, he realized that for the first time in his life, he was making a decision not for money or fame, but for himself. The next morning, Ethan called a meeting with the teachers and townspeople. He stood before them, his gaze steadier than ever. "I want to help this school grow. I will invest my entire fortune into expanding it and creating a free education system for underprivileged children. We won't stop at Maplewood, we'll take this model to many other places as well." The room fell into stunned silence. A man who was once a powerful billionaire was now willing to give up everything to become a benefactor for children in need. Then, a round of applause erupted, growing louder and louder until the entire room was filled with cheers and support. Ethan felt his heart pounding, but this time, it wasn't from anxiety or stress, it was from excitement, from the realization that he had finally found something truly meaningful. Ethan got to work immediately. He reached out to his old business contacts, not to discuss billion-dollar deals, but to seek funding for his new project. Some were shocked by his sudden change, others scoffed at him, but there were also those who were moved by the unwavering conviction in his voice. Gradually, the education fund was established, and the first donations began to pour in. Ethan dedicated all his time to improving the school, building more classrooms, purchasing books, and expanding educational programs. He was no longer just a businessman driven by profit, he was a man using everything he had to create real change. With each passing day, he grew fonder of this small town. He no longer thought about extravagant parties, luxurious penthouses, or the enormous numbers in his bank account. Instead, he found happiness in the laughter of the children, in the heartfelt thank you letters from teachers, and in the realization that he had rediscovered himself. One morning, Ethan stood atop the hill where he and Clara had once dreamed about the future. The breeze carried the fresh scent of grass and warm earth. He closed his eyes, letting memories wash over him. "Clara, I finally understand what you meant." A gentle smile formed on his lips as he felt a comforting warmth surround him. Though Clara was gone, she remained present in every action he took, in every dream he was now fulfilling. He had chosen his path. No longer the Ethan Blake of the past, no longer the cold-hearted billionaire chasing after fame. Now, he was someone new, someone who had finally found the true meaning of life. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with the program, we would love to hear your thoughts and feedback in the comment section. And if you find this program meaningful, don't hesitate to share it to support the channel and spread its value to those around you. Wishing you all a truly enriching listening experience. Ethan Blake was no longer a billionaire sitting at the pinnacle of power, but the challenges ahead of him were no less daunting. As he embarked on expanding the free education system, he quickly realized that the road ahead would not be easy. The first challenge was funding. Though he had invested a large portion of his personal fortune into the project, building a sustainable system required much more. Ethan began reaching out to his old contacts in the business world, but not everyone was willing to help. Some thought he was crazy, while others believed this was merely a publicity stunt. However, Ethan did not give up. He used the business acumen that had once made him a billionaire to persuade potential sponsors. Gradually, he found like-minded individuals, people who believed that education was the key to changing the future. One day, as Ethan was preparing for a meeting with investors, he received an unexpected letter. It was from his father, a man he hadn't spoken to in years. "Ethan, I've heard about what you're doing. I don't know if this is a late attempt at redemption, but I want to see you. There are things I need to tell you." Ethan read the letter with a heart full of conflicting emotions. His father had always been a strict man, believing that success was measured only by wealth and status. It was he who had taught Ethan to constantly strive higher, to put work above all else, but now, it seemed that even his father was beginning to reconsider those beliefs. After days of contemplation, Ethan decided to meet his father. The reunion was not easy. At first, there was only a heavy silence between them. But little by little, they began to open up. His father admitted that he had been wrong to prioritize material success over his son's happiness. He told Ethan that he was proud of him, not for what he had achieved in the past, but for the man he was becoming. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly understood. Ethan's project gradually expanded to more towns. Poor children no longer had to worry about tuition fees, and teachers became more dedicated, knowing they were teaching in an environment full of purpose. The people of Maplewood saw Ethan as a hero. But he only smiled and said, "I'm just continuing an unfinished dream." One evening, as he sat on the bench in front of the first school he had built, a young boy ran up to him. It was the same bright-eyed boy he had met on his first day back in Maplewood. "Mr. Ethan, I want to grow up and do what you do. I want to help others too." Ethan looked at the boy, warmth filling his heart. He placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled. "Then study hard, and one day, you'll do even greater things than I have." After years of searching for the meaning of life, Ethan had finally found his path. He was no longer a billionaire chasing fame, but a man using what he had to change the world. His education project continued to grow. And along with it, so did his heart. He no longer felt empty or regretful because he knew he was doing the right thing. One morning, as the first rays of sunrise touched the small town, Ethan stood on the hill where he and Clara had once dreamed about the future. The gentle wind carried whispers of old memories. He closed his eyes and embraced the peace within. "Clara, I did it." Though Clara was no longer here, Ethan knew she was still watching over him. And now, he was no longer lost. His journey wasn't over, it had only just begun, and so, Ethan Blake was no longer a name tied to billion-dollar deals or towering skyscrapers. Now, he was a teacher, an inspiration, a man who had found the true meaning of life in the laughter of children. Standing on the familiar hill, once filled with unfinished dreams, he knew he had fulfilled his old promise, not with fame or wealth, but with his heart and dedication. Because true happiness doesn't come from what we possess, but from what we give. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video to spread this inspiration to more people. See you in the next story.